All right. Good day to everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's edition of the Client Enrichment Series, where there's a will, there's a way to better workspaces. My name is Eric Fulton. I am a Client Relationship Manager in the Public Building Service Office of Client Strategy. But more importantly, I will be your host for today's session. Before we begin, I do want to go over just a few housekeeping instructions. We have automatically muted your audio to help us control the sound quality of the presentation. We invite you to submit questions to our presenters today. I will note there are two different pods in which you can interact with us. There is a chat pod and a Q&A pod. You can find these either as buttons at the bottom of your screen or in the three dots for more. If you have a question for our subject matter experts about the will, about the lessons learned, about how your agencies can take advantage and design more efficient workspaces, please put those in the Q&A pod. That's where our subject matter experts will be looking throughout the session. They will address your questions as they can during today's session. And at the end of today's session, whether we get to your question or not, we will export all of the questions, review the answers, and turn them into a formal Q&A document. Now, there's also a chat pod. The chat pod is if you have technical difficulties with the Client Enrichment Series functionality, if you have audio problems, if you need a copy of the slide deck, things like that, we have CES people manning the chat pod. We will also post helpful links there to websites and resources throughout the presentation. One more time, I do just want to reiterate, if you have a question about the will for our subject matter experts, please put that in the Q&A pod. All right, thank you very much. And now we are going to move on to today's topic. GSA debuted the Workplace Innovation Lab, the WIL, in 2023. It was a proving ground for design, technology, and furniture to support the future of the federal workplace. Today, we are looking back at the WIL's legacy and looking forward to how federal agencies can take advantage of the lessons learned to design workplaces for maximum efficiency, utilization, and cost effectiveness. And we have two highly qualified subject matter experts with us today. First, we will hear from Ryan Dorfler. Ryan is the Chief of the Interior Design, Programming, and Plans branch of the PBS Office of Engineering. He has an extensive history of collaborating with federal agencies to identify workplace arrangements that support employee work practices and achieve mission goals. In addition to his current role, and most importantly for today, Ryan has been program manager of several iterations of the Workplace Innovation Lab. We also have with us Dana Wickman. Dana holds a Bachelor of Science in Architecture and brings more than 25 years of design experience, having led large-scale interior design and workplace strategy projects for hospitality, corporate, and institutional clients in the public and private sector. Over her 16 years at the U.S. General Services Administration, she has directed the design, planning, and procurement of major federal workspace projects, earning recognition for solutions that enhance aesthetics, furniture functionality, and client objectives. So we have two well-qualified individuals with us here today. I am happy to turn over the presentation to Ryan, who's going to go over the agenda and dive into today's presentation. Ryan?
Great, thank you, Eric. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And just a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A pod. You may not see it on your screen, but I do have that pod open, and I'm ready to answer any questions that come along the way. And then when Dana joins us a little bit later in the presentations, I'll be queuing those questions up for her as well. Today, we're going to be spending the next hour or so exploring the Workplace Innovation Lab, both from its original design as how it's evolved to its most recent state, what we called WIL 7200, named after the location in the GSA headquarters building. Our agenda is spending a little time about the design, the information that we've collected, and most importantly, what we've learned about the original Workplace Innovation Lab, and how we applied those insights into the next iteration of the WIL. And of course, all the other lessons learned that we've picked up along the way, we're going to share those with you as well. First off, the original Workplace Innovation Lab, we're going to set some context as far as how it all started and our initial design. The overall WIL program, and you'll hear me mention WIL versus Workplace Innovation Lab. The overall WIL program had four basic goals that we've carried through from its start over the last couple of years. The first one is we wanted to make sure and ensure through the design And as we evaluated that it's a flexible living workplace lab, constantly changing as new innovations become apparent, whether it's in technology, furniture, space planning, anything that relates to that effective workplace. We wanted to give it a try and explore it as far as we could in this WIL environment. The other thing we wanted to do, particularly in the original WIL, was make it an on-demand collaboration space. At the time, there was definitely, and there still is, demand for shared spaces and co-working spaces of various shapes and forms and iterations. And what we wanted to do is to use this same environment that we were going to be testing all of these innovations, but also allow agencies and ourselves to experience it firsthand, not just walk through the space and see it, or experience it or learn a little bit about it in a session such as this. What we also wanted to do is to really demonstrate what GSA's value is to your agencies as far as supporting your missions, and also demonstrating our expertise. And so that's why, as we go through this presentation, what you're going to be seeing is, especially later on, is the value and the insights that GSA's workplace strategists, interior designers, architects, and everyone who has contributed to these WIL environments, this is the same value that we can provide to your agencies as well. And then lastly, one of the major goals of the WIL is being a source of inspiration for you. As you are designing your new workplaces, thinking about how to make your spaces more efficient, identifying ways to address return to office considerations, raising those occupancy levels, but still creating a workplace where your employees can thrive. My hope is that this presentation and the insights that's come out of this from our WIL efforts will be of some value to you. Ultimately, what we want to do is, as we help our agencies develop their new workplaces, is not only, of course, in addition to meeting the requirements as far as utilization rate and occupancy level, but again, making those workplaces something that employees really are eager to get back into and working full time. Now, the original WIL was, initial WIL was open in 2023. It seems it's really not that long ago, just a couple of years ago, that we opened essentially parts of the second floor in the 1800F building, our headquarters building, roughly 25,000 usable square feet. And in this instance, it included 6 unique neighborhoods. You see those broken up there, with that center section actually divided into two neighborhoods, which we'll cover shortly. Each of those neighborhoods allowed different vendors, including GSA. We had one of those vendors, to really try different ways and exploring different approaches to workplace planning, as well as furniture design and technology applications and those kinds of things. It was open from January 2023 to basically June of 2024, where we had to shrink it down to one wing due to various things going on in the building at that time. What you'll notice is that it is pretty much was the traditional mix of a lot of open areas, some enclosed spaces, and then in that instance, we did have a concierge to help with the multitude of tours that were going on and assisting our clients and GSA employees using the space as a co-working environment. One of the first neighborhoods that was provided was the all-steel neighborhood, and you'll see on the top right is a little map indicating where that neighborhood was located. The all-steel neighborhood really focused on things like ceiling acoustic absorbers, trying different approaches as far as workstations for small groups, and really leaning into creating a neighborhood that felt a bit more like home. As compared to that, Hayworth Price Modern had a different neighborhood where they took over that center wing section and actually rebranded the space. You see those as far as the column graphics there with the red and the yellow and the green, where really highlighting different neighborhoods that went along the themes of, as you see there, collaborating, creating, and control, and actually competing as far as how do we address different types of meeting space requirements. Kimball International also contributed in this by providing a neighborhood with a bit more flexibility and a lot more variations in the types of spaces. What you see there is an image as far as what Kimball provided where it's almost like stadium seating, where it's like the higher top seating and a counter to sit behind, and there's some lower seating right in front of it, and all facing towards a large screen to allow for video conferencing. This was great for impromptu meetings where you get a team together and you want to do a hybrid meeting, and you're having that all right there without tying up a formal conference room for that space. And so a lot of tech savvy spaces, a lot of informal spaces that clients were able to try out. The Miller Knoll neighborhood was on one of the other wings on the end cap, again, exploring different modes of work, all around mobility, ease of accessing the space. Many of the furniture components we can move around as well and reconfigure that depending on the needs of that particular person who's sitting there, or that organization that happened to be, or agency that happened to be using the space at that time. One of the fifth of the private sector partners in this was Swiss. Their workstations and their furniture arrived fully assembled. And so this was a really interesting take as far as provisioning of furniture, where all the furniture was fully assembled. There's no assembly there on site. Very mobile. Pretty much everything is on casters, so we were able to redeploy it to if it was, let's say you have a group meeting of 50 people and you want to move everything out of the way, or do a more traditional work environment with workstations and desking, benching solutions, those kind of things. It could be rearranged as well. And then the sixth environment was a GSA neighborhood, highlighting the different offerings that were available through a federal acquisition schedule and a few of the other design choices that we made at that time. So the original WIL, again, highlighted 6 different furniture and space environments. And on top of that was an overlay of technology that in this instance much of it was provided by Cisco, looking at things such as wireless tracking, a variety of different video conferencing solutions, some of those larger 55-inch screens on Salamander mobile stands that you can raise up and down and deploy those throughout the entire environment. Also at the time, we were testing different video conferencing solutions at the same time. So this innovation lab allowed us to test other technology that we deployed internally within GSA. Many of the different types of technologies we're all kind of used to at this point, but at the time in 2023 and the early part of 2024, this was newer, and it allowed us to take into considerations as far as how do we plan for incorporating the technology into the workplace so it truly is seamless, versus a desk that is there and we put a screen on top of it and we have cables running all over the place, and it just kind of, it doesn't work as elegantly as it could have with some advanced planning. What we found, so that's the environment of the original Workplace Innovation Lab. And again, as a reminder, and I'll pretty much remind everyone during these break screens to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A panel there. When the WIL shut down, and we looked at all the data that we collected it from a couple of different sources. From the technology standpoint, we had surveys, but we also looked at Wi-Fi hits. We looked at reservations. At that time, we did have a desk reservation, a room reservation system that we used. And you see the number of the quantity of interest, the amount of interest that we had in both meeting rooms, the enclosed meeting rooms that we reserve, as well as individual desk reservations. Those are the light blue on the left, middle of the left, and the top right. The number of federal employees, over 7,000 federal employees, and at least some of them were GSA, most of them were clients, toured the space, and many of those used the space themselves, because this was also a co-working environment that any federal agency could use. We had a number of sensors deployed. Some of the sensor approach we used was incorporated into the Cisco screens, which allowed us to look at things like humidity and air temperature and those kinds of things. But what was most interesting is this one particular subset of data that we collected, and on the environmental category, is noise levels. And seeing how the background, the ambient noise levels changed over time in different neighborhoods. And for us, as far as looking at the workplace and planning ahead and doing the space planning and identifying the details of furniture and finishes, Understanding acoustics as well as lighting. Those are very key considerations that are important. In this instance, having a sensor to capture this type of data and analyzing that data and using it as a way, one more data point to consider in the development of workplace strategies and designs. This is really interesting for us to explore. What we also did with the WIL is, of course, surveys. This is just a subset, some of the survey questions that we asked, but it was great to see when combined looking at the demand and the amount of people using the space, both the workstations and the meeting rooms, is that the satisfaction levels were all consistently high in that rating of 1 to 5, with 5 being good, right? Very good. And that they enjoyed using the space. They took away a lot of things. The majority of our users wanted to come back. As far as future improvement, there were some things that needed some tweaking as far as being able to store things there and storage solutions. But one of the themes that we kept on seeing as we looked at the data, so we created the WIL, tried out different neighborhoods, observed how people were using those neighborhoods, collected data back, and the themes that we're seeing that comes up over and over and over again is that high demand for meeting spaces, collaboration spaces. If you take the entire count of all the meeting rooms and enclosed spaces that were in the WIL, the top 10 of those, of that top 10, 90% of those of the reservations were for room capacities of 4 or more. So the larger rooms. You would think it would be the smaller ones, but it's actually the larger rooms, which makes sense because many of the reservations were for groups, smaller groups, and less about individuals from different agencies all sharing a space. Which correlates with the 48% of all reservations being more for meeting rooms. What we found as the WIL, particularly in the later months, the last 6 months or so, was a significant uptick in demand for, as word was spreading about the WIL and about how it was available there, how we were collecting research information and as well as still providing a benefit to other federal agencies. It increasingly became a venue for accommodating agency needs for larger collaboration and meeting events. Think of like town halls or all employee meetings where you need to get everyone together but do breakout sessions and those kinds of things. And what was nice about the WIL is the way that with the different neighborhoods and the way it was broken across between roughly 2.5 wings is we were able to have different groups occupy different sections at any given moment. And in some instances, a single agency or two would take over, reserve the entire WIL, all roughly 25,000 usable square feet for a single event with different types of activities occurring through the space. What that necessitated, and you see this on some of those examples on the bottom images, is us moving things around, moving chairs around, moving furniture around, which gets into high demand for meeting spaces, particularly the larger meeting rooms, the collaboration and flexibility, but also we need to have a lot of ability to move things around in response to the particular needs of that particular event, which gets into the lessons learned aspect of it. One of the things that we've learned, and these lessons learned ended up becoming the basis, the jumping off point for the next iteration of the WIL, WIL 7200, which we'll get into in a second. What we learned out of the original WIL was when looking at hybrid collaboration environments that accommodate that, and increasingly we need to take that into account with organizations that are distributed nationally, but as far as teams go, but they still coming into the office and a lot of video calls, is making sure, and this first bullet is probably the biggest one, is making sure that as you're planning your work environments, you're factoring in technology and to the point of what size screens and where it's going to be accommodated relative to the space itself and the furniture, as well as having that conversation with your technology folks as early as possible, okay? Bringing them together and making them part of the team. What we found as we went through developing the will, and we also discovered this as well as WIL 7200, is we would often get into, we would like to have this on this wall or have this type of meeting room do this. And when we started talking about what the technology would be, it necessitated subtle shifts or sometimes bigger shifts in what as far as the tenant improvements were, as far as the walls modifications, or as far as the furniture that was provided. And in some instances, what the acoustic impact would be as far as having a larger, if it was in an open area with a screen, and you got a louder meeting, where is that sound going to, and how do you mitigate some of that transmission, if you will? The other one that we saw, the takeaway, and this was apparent in the data and in the anecdotal feedback that we got as far as talking to customers who use the space, is variation is good. One size fits all doesn't really always work. What we found in the neighborhoods is that it was very distributed. It wasn't like one neighborhood dominated all the other ones as far as reservations and level of interest, if you will. And also seeing how occupants use the space and shifting it between us. And then the last big insight before we shift over to WIL 7200 is the demand for shared space. When we initially did this, it was to explore those variables that need to be considered in co-working, offering, as well as other shared types of approaches. Demand was high, definitely a lot of potential. But in looking back as far as how the space was used, thankfully, there was a lot of flexibility in that. That flexible supply created demand in that we were able to accommodate larger meetings and events like we saw in the earlier photos as well. And with that, we took this information and used this to inform the next iteration of the Workplace Innovation Lab, which is what we'll call WIL 7200. I see some questions there. Actually, we're going to do a quick scan, and I'm going to do a quick break for the questions, and then we'll get go into WIL 7200. One question is, do you remember if you ordered Squarespace as a standard product, or were you able to customize it? I'll need to get back to you on that one. This was like a year and a half ago, so I don't have that information off the top of my head. But like Eric mentioned, all these questions will be answered in more in-depth in the formal Q&A document. After the session is over. For the workspace satisfaction ratings, did you break that up by workstation type? Unfortunately, we didn't. It was part of that was we allowed each vendor. So yeah, Miller, Knoll, Hayworth, All Steel. I know I'm forgetting Swift and Kimball. It's basically said, here is a box, an area for you to explore and demonstrate different furniture offerings. We left it up to them to design it. And what that did was, and it was a very great benefit, had a wide variation in workstation types, benching solutions, chair types, pretty much anything you could think of was there. And I think part of the reason why we didn't try and capture that, a survey question on that type, because it would have been hard to capture all the different variations and have like a post-occupancy surveys, like, do you remember which chair you sat on of the 50 chairs in the space, and trying to evaluate that. So, but we'll do a more detailed response for you on that one. And did the data allow you to isolate open plan areas, correlation between noise levels and specific layout configurations? We got some of that information from the survey data and really just experiencing ourselves, because GSA was using the space at the same time. As far as like the acoustic sensor data, it was more about seeing how the potential was in the future, given the nature of that sensor, but we didn't use it specifically in the WIL to shape it in the later iterations. But there's definitely some potential there and worthy for future exploration. And can you revisit agencies began using WIL as part of their real estate plans? There were one of two agencies who's will address it. I know of two agencies, the names I can't remember, of course, who actually indicated as part of their plans, it might have been not the formal national real estate, like their strategic plan, but certainly we got some information from them saying they were counting on the WIL, using the information from that to help guide their decisions, or as a data point, if you will. This whole presentation is about sharing what we want, what we've collected about the WIL. in the hopes of doing just that in the future with all of you. And hopefully that last one about agencies using the will is something that we could do more and more of having that discussion later on after this session goes. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move along to 7200. So again, the Workplace Innovation Lab, next iteration was in wing 7200, so 7th floor, the middle wing. The GSA headquarters building is an E, and this was the center one. And so we called it WIL 7200 to reflect the location of where it was, not necessarily the version number of it, because it moved around. The WIL itself and the program kept going. It's just our focus changed, and the environment that we could do it in also changed as well. The goals for WIL 7200 is we want to really lean into that vision, the original things relating to a living lab, try new things out, evaluate it, use that insights to improve our offerings and our design decisions, as well as to share that with you all, like in this presentation right now. A demonstration of our expertise, and then, of course, inspiration for future government workplace design. That second part, the demonstration of GSA's expertise, in this instance, unlike the first WIL where the environments were each created, the 5 vendor environments, in GSA, of course, we did our own, but the 5 vendor environments, each of those manufacturers designed their own, what was in their box, their designated neighborhood area. In this instance, we decided to take it a completely different way. This is completely designed in-house. We didn't hire an AE firm or interior design firm to do this. We're fortunate to have Dana Whitman, who's the lead designer on this, to really talk through the vision of her designs. And then also the designs joining her was Allison Sawatsky and Kim Crane, who are also interior designers that helped create and really created WIL 7200. What we also wanted to do is, as I mentioned about the lessons learned from the WIL, is what we've seen was high demand for meeting spaces, high need for those meeting spaces to be flexible. And so what we did in WIL 7200 is, again, let's really lean into that. How far can we take it as far as workplace flexibility? Not just on how the space is being used, but also the individual furniture pieces themselves. And what we wanted to do is, to what extent, stop thinking about individual work points as like workstations and benching stations as only that, but to what extent can they be morphed into another purpose, such as serving a collaboration event or a meeting or ad hoc discussions, informal discussions, those kinds of things. And when Dana goes through that, she'll talk about it. And then also at the same time demonstrating that you can have these approaches, these strategy and design approaches in your work environment and still be able to meet your utilization and occupancy requirements. It's possible. It isn't. They aren't mutually exclusive, and that's probably the biggest takeaway that I asked from this presentation for you all. Now, before I turn it over to Dana, just a few snapshots of what it looked like before. You'll see some pictures of what the space, a lot of blue, which was great, but we wanted to do something different. And these are taken from a Matterport. That's why you see the little circles on the bottom. And it's a little out of perspective, kind of a fisheye look to it. And very traditional environment at the time. And this is the location where WIL 7200 was created. Here are some stats for it, but you know what? I want to turn it as about 7,200 square feet on 7,200, open for a year. Unfortunately, we're shutting it down now as we speak for the big 1,800 projects that's about to be underway. And you see some statistics there, but what I really want to do is hear from Dana, because I've been talking quite a bit. Dana, to guide us through the charrette process, how we did this in design, as well as ultimately giving us a tour of the WIL.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
So, hi everyone. I'm Dana Wickman. So the process for this was quite interesting. At the time, I was in Region 5 in Chicago, and the Workplace Innovation team reached out to all the interior designers at GSA, and we have quite a few highly talented people like myself to reach out and say, we have this vision that we want to recreate the WIL taking what we had learned from the first WIL and recreating it in this 7,200 space, which is probably about a third of the size of the original WIL. So Ryan and his team ran about a 2 to 3 day charrette with the entire team, and we shredded it out with all of our teams. We had inspiration, we had the story of what we were trying to speak for. We were trying to take all the data and roll it into a cohesive design in this space. So we all came to the table, we all presented our ideas, and it came down to myself, Allison, and Kim that decided that we would make this team to move this project forward. Again, this project was more of a cart before the horse type of project, not typical of a government project where you do the tenant improvement first and then you roll in your furniture. Our furniture selections directly influenced the tenant improvement, which was a very small budget. So we were working with existing conditions with minor fire life safety improvements and a few other improvements, as in some ABAS reconfigurations and some lighting. So this is kind of an imagery of what we had come up with as the concept, like this first initial, what could this be? Why could this be a little bit different than any other government office that we have done at GSA? How can we start pushing that envelope into what private sector does, what residential hospitality does, and bring it into the WIL to not only show the lessons learned from a functional standpoint of the first WIL, but how to bring in that aesthetic quality that, sometimes that government office is missing. So with this, we started rolling into a couple of months of design concept and procurement, writing the statement of works. And ultimately, we came up with a partnership with Bialik, who is a Miller Knoll, and they helped us develop that programmatic furniture concept. And we did work with PBS to develop a light tenant improvement based on these drawings. So Ryan, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of the package that Bialik put together. And we, as the design team, wanted to embrace ultimate flexibility as much as procurement rules could offer. So we wrote the statement of work to engage furniture manufacturers to the ability to what will be possible in the future when we start to procure this. We wrote it as vague as we could, allowing that flexibility to really have their products shine, products that were on FSS contract, products that we could open source market, products that typically aren't put in a government space. And we were able to work with the fabrics finishes to really show variation and show what was possible that we can procure as a government agency. Next slide. So here's the tour. So what we really wanted to do, again, was have this space speak volumes about what GSA can offer our client agencies. How can we tie this into something you've never seen? How can we showcase our technology, our brilliant interior design team at GSA, and how can we put our best foot forward, showing the flexibility and functionality of furniture as an integral piece into that tenant improvement while you're thinking of refreshing and renovating your spaces. So we wanted to start right from the get-go. So this is a view coming right off the elevator. We wanted it to be warm, welcoming, very functional, but very flexible. What we show here is kind of on the side, we have the Workplace Innovation Lab where we highlighted it with some very technical wallpaper and wall finishings. We also have an integrated dirt wall with integrated IT solutions that we are able to brand an agency if they wanted to come in for the day and do a touchdown and offsite. So we were able to take this entire space and digitally transform it into an agency space with our help of our concierge, who would have been able to tailor anything and all things digital to the user of the space. We had a little bit of a, as all projects do, had a very interesting surprise when we started drilling through the floor and we realized that it was all metal and we couldn't reconfigure the space how we wanted to, with a reception desk to the one side and this dirt wall monitor right in front. So we had to pivot on site as quickly as possible. So we were able to make those key decisions with the contractor on board and not have any lag time in the construction process. So we were able to move this desk to the side, which would have held two concierge. One would have been more check-in, more transactional. One would have been more for heads down work, making sure your systems worked and be able to answer any Q&As. So again, we broke up the space with this movable cart, which kind of added this backdrop to give a visual line of sight that this is where the Workplace Innovation Laboratory ends. So your natural instinct would be go around the corner to where that begins. So you can see on here, we added these slat walls were actually acoustic. So again, we thought about acoustical properties right when you walked in. So, and all the different textures and feels that we could, as far as a furniture solution, with the wallpaper, the glass dirt walls with the monitor, and these acoustical panels as you walked around the side. Next slide. So this is kind of the view walking through the lab, or beginning to transition from 1800F to 7200. What we envisioned was that juxtaposition of modern and old, since the building at 1800F is both. We have a modern entry and we have a historical entry. So our idea was to take that historical vernacular and tie it in with that modern vernacular in this hallway as a transition into this Workplace Innovation Lab, which is all about new and modern. How do we do that? So the idea is we got a lot of, this is not going to work with this darker black color. It's going to feel dark. It's going to feel cramped. It's not going to feel warm and inviting. There's not going to be any light. And we're like, trust the process. It's going to look amazing. And when we roll this out, it gives that nice dynamic that you're walking through to something amazing on the other side. It does tie in a lot of the detailing that's in 1800F as the historical wing, the picture frame molding, the wainscoting. And on the other side, it is this acoustical panel. We were able to, these are just regular monitors that we landed up flipping portrait style instead of landscape, to again either brand with the agency that might be using the space, or if it wasn't being used, we used it for GSA. We showcased our artwork, our fine arts collection on these as a digital way to showcase our offerings, just while if nobody was in it. So we always had something on the board that was always moving and transitioning. Get some soft seating just to show a different way that we can offer a little bit more variety in soft seating with different depths and comfort levels. So moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to do one quick
Oh,
call. This is a great image, is a great example of the importance of having the, in this instance, having our IT, our GSA IT representatives a part of the project team, because as we have started talking about this, and this is on the slat wall on the side, and the integration of existing screens. How can we do that without purchasing brand new equipment that might be fancy that we see? So as we have existing screens, can we flip it and still keep the overall design? It was kind of like a quick, okay, what about this? What about that? How do we flip this? All those little subtle down to the half-inch type discussions to make sure it fit really well. And it was really important for us for this to come across clean and with a good amount of pop to it, is because again, this allowed, as Dana mentioned, if an agency says, I want to reserve all of WIL 7200 for an event, and they have breakout rooms or different types of topics, they can display all that on the screens here and put their own logo on it. So this space for that day or whatever time is their reservation period is their space, their government innovation lab, not just a workplace innovation lab. And that's why and it all came down to having the technology representative part of the project team and making sure those little details didn't snowball to prevent us from achieving this vision. Yeah.
Right. We
Thank you.
definitely worked hand in hand with IT and facilities on this entire project. So it was definitely a collaboration with all entities. Okay, moving down. So this is kind of another money shot. This is kind of going into the kitchen pantry area on the left, as well as on the right, you see that line of sight that usually in this building and a lot of other federal spaces, you kind of have a bowling alley line of sight. So we wanted to break that up and make it something to be investigated, something intriguing, like what's around the corner. So if we go around the pantry, again, working with a lot of existing furniture, we really had that at the top of our mind. What can we reuse? So you can see on the in the pantry area, we reused a lot of the tables. We reused a lot of we didn't change any of the ceiling, the reflected ceiling plan, but we did add some color pops to highlight the drywall versus the ACT. We added some pendant lighting. We added stools. We wanted to make this more of a fun, fresh area. We did add this banquette with power throughout. We were fortunate enough to have power in that location. We really tried to introduce a lot of biophilic properties into this space. The way we did that was through art. I know a lot of times we have to get a lot of maintenance and facility contracts on board, but we didn't have time for that in this circumstance, in this situation. So we worked with vendors that did preserved moss. That way we could have that it is live moss, but it's preserved. So it has that greenery. It's got that freshness, but there's zero maintenance to this. It has a long lifespan, so it's not going to fade. It requires just a light dusting, maybe once a year. But we did integrate this map, this laser cut map of Washington, D.C., the Potomac River, as kind of a backdrop, as a fun, beautiful way to bring in those elements. Going around the corner, we were able to think a little bit outside the box. We were like, well, what if we did a chalkboard paint and maybe did the United States with our hubs and spoke locations? So we were able to identify myself and the Priya from IT, we drew this in a weekend. We drew this and put our little hubs and spoke locations on it, and we just framed it in a wood that matched the wood legs on the table next to it. You can see this table. It's more of a community table. You go up there, there's usually puzzles up there, just kind of a nice brain break for anybody that just needs to step away from their desk for a little bit. We were cognizant of ADA, so we did a split level, so you can have bar height or wheelchair accessible level. We also tried to reutilize some of the existing conditions, some of the existing finishes. So the pantry bottom, the millwork, the countertops, we reused. It was an FRP backsplash. We wanted to update it, so we selected this very trendy hexagon tile just to show, again, this is innovation. What trends are happening now? How can we bring in some of that residential into this space? We did a bistro shelving kit for the microwaves instead of just another millwork piece. We were able to use some stainless or some metal pipes and some millwork, again matching to the overall aesthetic of the entire space. So walking into the WIL, this is more the open area that we had to work with. Again, we had a lot of architectural constraints that kind of limited us on the flexibility of the space. Unlike a large open floor plan, we had these large 30-inch column bays that we had to kind of work with. So we wanted to make it inviting, intriguing, and bring in like your eye from front to back, like what is this? So I thought a great way to do that would be with, again, a residential type of indirect lighting. So we were able to get these lights through visual comfort through Bialik and the Miller Knoll contract to highlight in a different way that, again, is not government's used to bring in that natural aesthetic, as opposed to overhead lighting. We have this backdrop, which is another dirt wall. It's a demountable wall. We did a floor-mounted acoustical lamp that you can see that's kind of floating in this pergola. So for a few years now, we've been exploring a lot of these indoor architectural solutions to make little breakout areas, to change the environment a little bit. And I'll really tell you, when you step into this space, it feels like a completely different room. It feels a little bit more intimate, more lower ceiling. We definitely kept the ceiling open here, so we didn't have to mess with our fire life safety and sprinkler heads. So we were able to just pop this in and build it. It assembles within a day, and we added a little bit more of a conversation piece, visual component. And it is a nice breakout space from the other areas in the on the floor plan that are a little bit more utilitarian. So again, oh, sorry, it's fine. I was going to say this table was an existing table, and there was another one across the way. So with these existing pieces, we, instead of replacing them, we refinished them. They started to yellow a little bit, so we wanted to integrate how can we refurbish what we have. And this is one of those that we sent back to the manufacturer for a retouch, and they brought it back. So we did this in a few areas around the building. So the next slide. This is just another vignette that we had on the floor, because a lot of people meet in different types of ways. So this space was supposed to be, again, set up by the concierge every night. So if an agency wanted to come in, or GSA wanted to come in and completely change the functionality of the space, they were able to reset it to its proper location based on our floor plans. This furniture was a little bit more of a loungy furniture, but it was all movable and on casters with pulls and light enough that concierge can move it around. All these laptop tables, which I know when you meet and collaborate, you need a place to set your laptop or your cup of coffee. These are all adjustable, height adjustable. So we wanted to incorporate this vignette to show that you can still have a functional meeting that is productive with lounge type furniture. Everything you see in these spaces is ergonomically correct for that laptop work. We didn't want anything too deep. We didn't want anything too low. So we're really cognizant of the furniture choices that we had made with Bialik. We also introduced throw pillows and a little bit more of a fun pattern, just to show that we don't have to be a sterile blue and a sterile maroon. We can play with the colors a little bit more in our portfolios. So moving on. So this is a little area that is behind that wall with that architectural solution. We created these little pockets that were highly flexible that you could use as a hybrid meeting. We had integrated monitors on the walls behind these screens. We had these tables that could be moved. Everything's on caster. If you wanted to set up where you're doing more of a classroom setting with your monitor, you could do that. These are at perch height. So you sit up a little bit higher. My 12-year-old likes to work at the kitchen counter when he's doing his homework. So we wanted to be cognizant of those different neurodiverse ways of working. So this gave a different height, and it leveled off with that hybrid TV. So we were thinking about that. We thought about the lighting on the ceiling. These are dimmable by the user. So if the lighting that was a little too bright and during that hybrid meeting, or you wanted to just have a 4-pack meeting, you could dim it how you wanted to. These panels that you see are acoustical panels, and these were kind of a new trend that we saw that rolled out at NeoCon when we were doing this. So we were like, what if we incorporated this and tested out actual STC ratings, and how did they make the space feel? Did they really absorb any sound? We kind of came to the conclusion they don't really absorb that much sound, but they did absolutely give the sense of enclosure. So these all you can enclose all sides of these little pods to make it your own little space for the day. Again, they did lessons learned through a lot of these. Very interesting, very, very beautiful. Would I do it again? Yeah, I think I would in a certain program. It's need. Yes, I think there is a function to these too. So moving on. So this is just another side, again, working with the architectural constraints. Again, what the lessons learned from the first will is this needed to be more of a large gathering area for those agency offsites that could accommodate large groups of people. So we try to do exactly that. You can see this monitor on the back is on a salamander, and it has the functionality to go up and down as needed. You could see from that last slide that we had the perch height tables and chairs, and in this shot you can see we have desk height chairs and seating, as well as we have bar height seating. So that was intentional. So if you did meet with everybody and you were looking at a screen, you could stadium height your meeting. So you could do the lower seats at the front, you could stack them to a perch height, and then you could do a bar height in the back so everybody could see the screen. Again, everything's on casters, everything's movable, and so it gives ultimate flexibility that would be reset at the end of the night for the next guest. So moving on, oops. So on the back of those movable tables, we had these areas that provided a little bit more of a breakout space and a touchdown space. If you were in these all-day meetings, you could go over here, have a different type of environment set up. So these were more of an undulating banquette seating that you could actually get some work done. They had power throughout. They had different types of seats. This was a egress path, so we were cognizant of making sure that the furniture wasn't as easily movable, as well as it had a return swivel on it, so it wouldn't get into that path of movement. So everything was nicely tucked by the windows. This table that you see kind of in the corner of the lower right was an existing table that we had used, and we just topped it with some frosted glass just to give it a different feel, different variety, and test how people would use it and test its durability. This space saver credenza that you see in the back here was just a nice way to visually break up the spaces between more of a lively action space and more of a heads down type of area. We accessorized it, and it gave, these are like acoustical panels, a little bit of acoustic, but they also do bring a little bit more of that biophilic element in there. These are actually recycled mushroom panels to bring some of that interest into the unit. So we had a couple of different configurations of height adjustable tables, and each of the height adjustable tables we try to do something a little bit different to show variety. These we had box files that were integrated into the leg to show that we could give it ultimate space down for the user at the bottom. We also positioned these felt acoustical panels on the height adjustable, so when the height adjustable moves up, that panel moves up with it. If we want to go to the other side, I guess we're going around the corner. We also put in some pods, some phone booth pods. These are two different phone booth pods. We did get on bailment agreement to test out their functionality. They are both zero threshold. So one is ADA compliant, one is not. And we wanted to really test out that new development in the world of pods. These had an air refresh rate that were higher than your normal pod, so they didn't get as stuffy as ones that we might have purchased prior to this project. We didn't want to include any fire suppression in them, as well as we didn't want to have to change our sprinkler systems ahead either. So we were very strict about a 54 square feet in the ADA compliant one, and spacing it out 8 by 18 inches with the non-ADA. So you're able to space those between the columns perfectly.
Yeah, and just one thing to add on the pods, and what we learned is if anyone is thinking about doing pods in your workplace, is just put in the back of your mind, what's the fire life safety implications associated with it? It's not only the size, but it's also is like the pods can't be, you got to have some noise coming from the outside in case there's an alarm. It can't be so quiet in there that you don't hear anything. So just a good rule of thumb is if you are ordering pods and putting it in your workplace, whether you're working from our designers or on your own, just do that check. So it's like someone from fire life safety, just to make sure everything is good in that aspect.
Okay, so moving on. Again, this is just a different reconfiguration of a couple of different height adjustable tables. The one in the forefront is, well, the back area is more panel based. We had all of our wiring and cabling going through those gallery panels at the bottom, and all of the upper panels stayed what's the word I'm looking for? Static when the height adjustable table went up and down. We were, and this picture doesn't show it, we did switch our monitors. We worked with IT to be 34-inch curved monitors, so we only needed one monitor arm per workstation. These on the front end are a little smaller. These are about a 30-inch pack. They come in a pack, fully assembled for height and down. These are very much laptop appropriate sized height adjustable tables. They're not meant for all day work. They're meant for those touchdown hot desking areas that you just need a place to pop down, and the height adjustability to go with it. So you're not building an entire pack. This comes as a pack, just to show some variety and sizing too. Okay. This was just kind of a fun little art installation piece we did. This is actually felt. It's a Fitz felt accessory. We were able to, try to test out the acoustical properties in this. It doesn't give much, but it does give a little bit of color variation, some interest. It's very durable. It just broke up the monotony of this large white wall. We were able to pull in the colors from the fabrics that we used and pseudo customize this to fit the aesthetic of our office. Mm-hmm. So one thing we did learn from the first WIL is the variation of different types of work environments and conference rooms areas. So this is an enclosed room that used to just be your typical desk with office chairs. And we really wanted to push the limits on, could we do one of these residential type living room setups, and would it be used? Turns out this room was always booked. Everybody loved the idea of coming in here, using it more for a brainstorming, more casual type meetings with a hybrid functionality to it, accessorizing it, working with area rugs with a smooth transition. So we did take into concern the durability, the quality, and that transition strip to introduce area rugs into our design. We had some acoustical felt on the wall existing, but we really were trying to make sure that with this project, a lot of public areas always have a fit and finish budget that usually is kind of wiped out in a government budget that includes accessories and photos and pictures. We definitely thought about that early on, so we budgeted for that throughout the project. So we were able to introduce part of the procurement artwork throughout the space. This is another way we worked with our tenant improvement to make sure that the aesthetic, the tenant improvement, and the furniture procurement all kind of went together. We designed this interesting wall of tile and biophilic properties. Again, this is exactly the moss that was in the front pantry with those those maintenance requests built into this. It's low maintenance, no maintenance, preserved moss that just gave a very nice visual to it. This is the importance of tying in your tenant improvement and those construction documents and the construction process into that furniture, where you might have more of this creativity allowance, and working those together instead of an afterthought. Moving on. So this is kind of an example of how we thought, again, with the color tones. So we thought of the flooring. This is an antimicrobial chili witch vinyl product that we introduced as just a different way of thinking. There's a terrace right outside of this room. So we wanted to make sure that this was easily cleanable with a bleach solution, and tying in some ergonomics egress, I'm sorry, not ergonomics, egress pathways through this. So you're not having a line of foot traffic that's going to transition over like a carpet tile or something. We want to be really aware of those paths of travel. So that's why we chose a different variation in the vine here. We were trying to think throughout the life of this project what this room could be. Turns out this room was very much used as a community farm table type setup. Nobody wanted to get rid of it. So we did work with what was existing. We introduced some more durable finishes. We worked with some laminates that didn't show fingerprints. We worked with some more durable fabrics that had more of a higher content double rub. So this space could be a little bit more used and abused, other than some of the other spaces that were more vinyl and polypropylene heavy. We changed the lighting in this space. We dealt with a little bit more of the concerns of the existing soffits. So we tried to really play with our architectural solutions. We did an acoustical panel back here, an undulated acoustical panel with a wood border. Again, we changed out some of the lighting, but we did work with a lot of what was existing. And again, you can see in the corner, we did a lot of maps throughout, a lot of maps of Washington, a lot of maps of DC, a lot of historical maps, and then introduced some of these different privacy seating arrangements throughout to, again, test what's used, what's not used, and introduce some things that you definitely don't see in other parts of the building.
And I think that's it on the tour part. Yeah, thank you, Dana. So I'm going to shift gears a bit, just talk about how the space was designed for adapting to a special event. As a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A pod. We'll actually address all the other questions at the end of the session. If you recall, in the beginning, the first WIL, high demand for a venue to accommodate those ad hoc or those larger events. And that flexibility and the provision of that type of space was created by Dana, Allison, and Kim, basically the GSA interior designers that led this effort. One of those approaches that was integrated into that, it's like, how can the space be reconfigured to accommodate those special events? And you see different zones here, where as part of the design and thinking through the use cases of how WIL 7200 would be utilized by agencies, is making sure that it could accommodate special events, whether it was one organization that took over all of 7200, or even maybe broke it up into 2 or even 3 organizations having their own special events. Touching back to what Dana mentioned as far as the different, like the perch counter and the desk height seating, or desk and seating that was there, this was done on purpose so that way it could be basically redeployed elsewhere in the WIL to meet different configuration options depending on the size and purpose of that meeting space. And you see here a couple of different scenarios and how it would work, with the little blue rectangles representing those portable Cisco boards or large screens that are on adjustable height mobile stands, and we can move those around. So this was just one of the approaches that was part of integrated into the design process behind the WIL 7200. Lessons learned. There were some additional lessons learned that we took from the original WIL carry them through WIL 7200, and that we're offering here for you. Again, that high demand for meeting space, what we ended up doing is in WIL 7200, making that design really heavily focused on collaboration, making sure that really identifying ways of making sure those individual work point, the furniture that's associated with that could be reused for a meeting, and basically, like I just mentioned earlier, for special events, and then also ensuring that we could digitally rebrand the space using the data that we collected from the original WIL to inform the design direction for WIL 7200. Another example of that is looking at the data that we collected both from reservations and survey data on the original WIL, as far as how the neighborhoods were, which ones were used more often, looking at observations about why they were used more often, and then using that, informing that as far as a strategic approach as far as how can we maximize the flexibility of configurations in WIL 7200. What we found is, and you see there on the pie chart, the SWS is the Swift space. That's the one where the furniture was all on casters. That particular space was used quite a bit because it was on casters and the space could be reconfigured. So in WIL 7200, it's like, let's take that and more formally adopt that as far as, again, the design direction for WIL 7200. The other lesson learned in this one, which I offer to everyone here, is as you have these strategy and design discussions and really getting into the details, is making sure that an expert, an interior designer, or some other experts really looking at considering the whole picture, whether it's the lighting, the color, acoustics, and you see those there. The lighting was a big one, and Dana mentioned as far as choosing the color of that grayish color that you see in the screen, is there were concerns about it too dark. It's easy to think that if you're just looking at a swatch of saying, okay, yeah, this looks too dark. What we need to do is also take into account the lighting. In this instance, that was very much the case, taking into account the daylight that was coming in, the light fixtures that were going to be installed, maintaining the psychology and the warm aspects of the color choices that you see there in the color psychology, and trying incorporating acoustics and biophilic design and making sure that space was adaptable. And what we learned on the bottom was the soft panel meeting rooms is factoring in privacy, but making sure to distinguish between acoustic and visual privacy. And what we've learned in this instance, in those panel type rooms, great for visual privacy, but not so much for acoustic. And definitely use them again, but keeping in mind as far as other considerations in the workplace. So the last slide, before we really open it up to questions here, is that this is really everything that we've learned from both the original Workplace Innovation Lab and its next iteration called WIL 7200. The GSA interior designers that I have the pleasure of working with, they are organized by client, not by geography. So for each of you, whatever agency you're with, there is a GSA interior designer that's dedicated to focus on your design and furniture needs, with the intent being that over time, they will get a deeper understanding of your design goals, your guidelines, and of course your challenges, whether that may be occupancy, how to use existing space, what other furniture type acquisition methods you have, or maybe you want to use some of ours with our partners in the Federal Acquisition Service. They also can identify opportunities as far as these insights, offering ways to instill that into your workplaces. So my offer to all of you, this is the sales pitch, is feel free to reach out to the interiors team and strategy team as well at workplace@gsa.gov for a consultation, just to talk about this and brainstorm some ways on how we can possibly help you. With that, before we turn up the question, Dana, is there anything that we missed in the presentation portion before we really open it up to Q&A?
No, I think you did great. Thanks.
Okay. All right, I'm going to scroll down again. We're only answering the questions that are in the Q&A pod. I saw the chat, a lot of things were happening on the chat. We're not going to get to those. Let's see, workspace satisfaction. When reusing furniture, Dana, I think this one's for you, from Kelly. When reusing furniture, did you update the fabric finishes? Did you just clean the existing furniture, etc.? What did you do?
That's a great question. So we learned that it wasn't always advantageous for us to use a lot of furniture that had fabric upgrades. If we could reuse things that were maybe a solid surface that weren't scratched, like a laminate or some kind of hard material, the glass, we did that. We did reuse our seating, our task chairs, the ones that were in better condition. I believe that we worked with OAS and they replaced a lot of the elbow pads. So we were able to get parts and components for that. But a lot of what we incorporated into the design were the better pieces that weren't fabric heavy.
Great. And then we have two questions from Kathy. The first one, who was the vendor for the preserved moss art piece?
I'm going to have to get back to you as somebody local, and I was somebody local in DC.
Yeah, again, for everyone, if we can't answer,
Yes.
regardless of whether we answer it or not, we're going to still answer all the questions in that formal post session document. And then another one from Kathy, are monitor arms on height adjustable tables redundant?
No, because the monitors are static, and when you want to raise your height adjustable table, that so you work, the monitor goes with you so you can work. And I use it at my desk every day, that I just have my keyboard on and my laptop, and then the height adjustable monitor goes with it. So I personally like to stand and work and look at my my monitor arms, so it all moves together.
Right.
Mhm.
And then we have two things from Kelly. First one, are you taking a look at the WIL building credits and seeing if there's any way for the federal government to incorporate any credits that are unique to their program and may not necessarily overlap with practices that have been established by LEED? Quite honestly, I don't know, and we'll have to get back to you on that one, unless Dana, you know the answer to that question.
No, sustainability wasn't really one of our key deciding factors in this project, although we are very cognizant and try to use more of the sustainable recyclable materials, but we didn't, it wasn't a driver for this project.
And then also from Kelly, no question, just a comment. I'll just keep reading it. As an NCIDQ and lead commercial interior designer with over 20 years of experience, I spent a substantial part of my career navigating the gap between major furniture manufacturers, marketing claims, and real world functional workplace solutions. I've been waiting for tests and data like this. This was awesome. Thank you, Kelly, and congrats on all your work and efforts. We're just two of a much larger team, but thank you, Kelly. This is it's fantastic to hear.
Thank you, Kelly. As a NCIDQ 20 plus years person, this was an amazing project. It really gave us the ability to showcase what we can do as interior designers and really look at a building and interior design holistically with that furniture aspect. So it was a fantastic project to work on. We had a great team. We worked really well with the tenant improvement construction side. We were really more engaged than our typical government project where we're all siloed off. This was very much a community effort project.
Two more things. Next one is from Patrick. With return to office requirements, does GSA see any design trend changes? Is there a switch to more private individual offices / workspaces versus open / shared workspace types? There's a lot there, certainly. I think, I mean, just from what I'm seeing, and admittedly, I've shifted from a workplace strategy function for quite some time to interior design just recently. And this is something we'll do a more proper response, a more robust response in the Q&A. The challenges of efficiency, the financial constraints, the real estate constraints, whatever, many agencies had design standards before RTO. Those were all just considerations that need to be factored into account. The key thing, what we're seeing is still very much the same as before, is circling back to what are those constraints and requirements, and let's find ways to still design a really effective, vibrant workplace without just doing the numbers. A concern that I have, this is me, Ryan, talking, is it's easy to get really locked into the numbers and making the numbers work and rushing to get the numbers and not thinking about how you can also have good design, great design, that can achieve those numbers as well. But as far as specific trends, switch to private offices space types versus open shared workspace types, we're still seeing it all over, depending on which agency you're from, which privacy requirements they are. And then, of course, the math gets a bit different as far as use it act requirements and all that kind of stuff. So in this one, what I would say is if you're curious on how like the WIL or our other experiences could be a benefit to you, I really encourage you reaching back out to us. This is for everyone. Right back to us at workplace@gsa.gov. And then that way I can connect you with the appropriate strategist or the interior designer that focuses on your agency and really have a tailored, robust conversation about that. And the last one, Dana, this one's for you. Can you provide 1 or 2 examples? 1-2 examples. So if there's a 1.5 example, I want to hear 2. One or 2 examples of the outcome of the charrettes.
Sure. I think the biggest one is we were all gung-ho about removing walls and tearing things down and changing the space and making structural changes and making this a $5 million project. And that was definitely, we had to hone that in a little bit. I think we all came to the table with some fantastic ideas. I really do think that we all wanted to create that branding, that sense of an agency belonging to the space when you first walked in. So we all wanted that visual connection. That was an outcome that we felt as a group was really important, to have that strong identity that we could brand towards each agency that used our space. Another example of an outcome was we all really wanted to focus on how we could revolutionize our kitchen and our pantry to make it a little bit more warm, inviting, someplace we want to be at. We've all been in the sterile pantries, the galleys that just don't have any warmth, that you want to have that water cooler talk to your partners with, and your coworkers with. And we all tended to put a little bit more emphasis on design in those spaces. So we definitely wanted to roll our sleeves up and make sure those design details were part of that area, trying to make it a little warmer than how pantries are right now. So I think we all got a lot of different little nuggets from everybody's design. It was just more of like, how do we integrate everybody's great ideas? We had lots of ideas like, let's roll up IT in here. Let's have a community outreach. Let's bring people from the building up to this space so everybody can use it. I think that was a major driver, is how do we promote this from within, and making sure that everybody at GSA could reach out to our client agencies, go, wow, have you seen the WIL? Come on over, experience it, see what we can do for you. Those were some of the outcomes and some of our key drivers for, at least when that charrette happened, and what we embraced moving forward with our final design.
And with that, we got one more item, and then we'll go ahead and go on mute off camera so Eric can wrap us up. Last one is from Belinda. Just a comment, this work should be shared to the bigger world so people in private sector get a glimpse of what the government can do. I agree 100%, Belinda. Thank you very much for that. So with that, Eric, I'm going on mute and going off camera to close this out. Thank you.
Well deserved. Thank you both, Ryan and Dana, for me having been in various stations of the WIL. It was like a nice walk down memory lane. I enjoyed those noise canceling pods that you were talking about. quite greatly myself. So again, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Dana. Thank you to all of our audience of federal agency customers who are with us today for this great session. Ryan and Dana did a great job of answering questions that you asked and indicated that there are others that we will pull out and get answers to. All of that information will be put into a resources and Q&A doc that will go up onto our website, www.gsa.gov/CES, as soon as we are able to do so. I want to point out that we have many more CES sessions in the works. We've done 7 since we relaunched this program in March. We are taking a couple of weeks in late summer to regroup and schedule some presentations for the fall. So once we have those in hand, they will be posted on our website. Again, you see it on the screen. It's www.gsa.gov/CES, and we will certainly send it around promotionally via email as well. In the interim, if you can't get enough of the Client Enrichment Series, you can hit our YouTube channel. The link is at the bottom of the presentation deck, which will be sent out to you later today. And you can check out archived editions of the Client Enrichment Series 24/7. So with that, one more time, thanking all of the GSA PBS staff on the Client Enrichment Series side who were doing great work behind the scenes, Ryan and Dana, and all of our customers who registered and attended today. Just want to remind everybody that the goal of the Client Enrichment Series is to engage our audience in workplace topics that contribute to your mission success and to the effective management of your real estate and workplace programs. One more time from all of us, all of you, thank you very much for attending, and have a great rest of your day.